All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going on a bit of a journey back in time to explore some of the biggest questions that shaped ancient India. And you'll see, a lot of them continue to shape our world right now. What's the meaning of it all? What happens after we die? I mean, these are the big ones, right? The questions we all ask. Well, thousands of years ago, thinkers all across ancient India kicked off this profound quest for answers, creating this rich, complex tapestry of spiritual and philosophical ideas that we're going to unravel today. You see, this deep curiosity about the universe wasn't just some passing thought. It became the very engine driving a civilization's search for meaning. So let's trace that quest, starting right at the beginning with the very first answers ever put into words. So where do we start? We've got to go way back to what's known as the Vedic Age. We're talking a period from around 1500 to 600 BCE. This is where we find the first real comprehensive attempts to tackle those huge universal questions, all captured in India's oldest sacred texts, the Vedas. Now, the first thing you have to wrap your head around is this idea of Shruti. The Vedas weren't originally books. They were a living, breathing oral tradition. I mean, just imagine memorizing thousands of verses and getting the pronunciation and rhythm absolutely perfect, and then passing them down flawlessly, generation after generation. This is such an incredible feat of memory that UNESCO has actually recognized Vedic chanting as an intangible heritage of humanity. Just amazing. So the oldest of these texts is the Rig Veda, and it's packed with over 1,000 hymns composed by these wise sages called rishis. And these weren't just simple prayers. They were these beautiful, poetic praises to the forces of nature, to gods like Indra, the god of rain, Agni, the god of fire, and Surya with sun. This was their way of connecting with the cosmos and getting guidance on how to live a good life. But, as time went on and the rituals got more and more elaborate, some thinkers started to get this feeling, like maybe something was missing. They started looking not to the skies, but inward, searching for a deeper, more personal kind of spiritual meaning. And this was a huge shift in Indian thought. And that's where the Upanishads come in. The name itself is so cool. It means to sit near someone, which gives you this great image of students learning directly from their teachers. And here, the focus totally shifts from performing rituals for external gods to this internal philosophical quest. The big ideas are Brahman, the single universal soul that connects everything, and Atman, which is the individual soul that's inside every single one of us. The Upanishads gave us a concept that would become absolutely central to Indian thought, samsara. This is the idea that the individual soul, the Atman, is locked in this continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. It's a perpetual journey, moving from one life to the next. So the soul is on this endless journey. You're born, you live, you die, and then you're reborn into a new form. But the thinkers of the Upanishads asked a really crucial question. Is there a way out? Can you break free from this endless wheel? And the answer they came up with? Moksha, ultimate liberation from that cycle of samsara. And this freedom wasn't something granted by a god. It was something you had to achieve through this deep personal realization. The moment you truly understand that your individual soul, your Atman, is one and the same with the universal soul, Brahman. So how do you even begin to explain something that's everywhere but totally invisible? Well, a sage in the Chandogya Upanishad used this really beautiful analogy. He asks his son to dissolve salt in water. The salt vanishes, right? But you can taste it in every single drop. And he explains that Brahman is just like that. You can't see it, but it's the fundamental essence of everything. Okay, so you have these really powerful Vedic ideas taking shape. But guess what? Not everyone was buying it. Around the 6th century BCE, a whole wave of new thinkers popped up and they questioned everything. It was a true rebellion of ideas, a dramatic turning point that opened up these radical new paths to understanding life. On one hand, you had the established Vedic tradition, with its focus on rituals and hymns to gods. But these new schools of thought came along and basically flipped the whole thing on its head. Thinkers like the Buddha and Mahavira, they emphasized personal enlightenment and ethics like ahimsa or nonviolence. They were not afraid to question authority. There was even this materialist school called Charvaka that pretty much rejected the soul and the afterlife entirely, saying, hey, the here and now is all that matters. Now, one of the most influential of these new thinkers was a prince named Siddhartha. I mean, this guy lived the ultimate sheltered life of luxury, totally protected from any kind of hardship. But one day, he leaves the palace, and for the very first time, he sees an old man, a sick man, and a dead body. And these sights just shatter his reality. He realizes that life is full of suffering, but then he sees a peaceful ascetic, and it sparks a new question. Could there be a way to overcome all this suffering? And that one question sent Siddhartha on this epic, years-long quest for answers. Finally, he sat down to meditate under a peepal tree in a place called Bodh Gaya. After 49 days, he found the answers he was so desperately searching for. He achieved enlightenment, and from that moment on, he was known as the Buddha, which just means the enlightened one. So what was his big answer? The Buddha taught what's known as the Eightfold Path. It's a guide to living a balanced life. You might have heard it called the middle path because it avoids the two extremes he had experienced himself, the crazy indulgence of his palace life and the severe self-denial he tried as an ascetic. It's a path of moderation, based on principles like right understanding, seeing the world as it really is, and right action, acting with compassion toward all beings. And believe it or not, around the very same time, another prince, Vardhamana, was on a very similar journey. He also left his royal life behind to search for enlightenment. He would become known as Mahavira, the great hero, and he was a central figure in Jainism. And just like the Buddha, he rejected the Vedic traditions, instead teaching a path of intense self-control and, most famously, complete nonviolence or ahimsa. A really core Jain idea is something called anekantavada, which basically means that truth has many sides. And it's perfectly captured in that famous parable of the blind man and the elephant. You know the one. Each man touches a different part of the elephant. One feels the trunk, another the leg, another the tail. And each one describes the truth of the elephant completely differently. The thing is, none of them are totally wrong, but none of them are totally right either. The lesson is that truth is complex, and all of our perspectives have some value. But here's the thing. This incredible explosion of ideas wasn't just happening in these major schools of thought. For centuries, a rich tapestry of folk and tribal traditions was also being woven into the cultural fabric of India, constantly interacting with and influencing all of these other philosophies. What we often think of as Indian culture is really this amazing synthesis of so many different streams of thought. A lot of deities worshipped across India today, like Murugan or Jagannath, actually have tribal origins. You have tribal communities creating their own unique versions of the great epics, and sacred animals from tribal worship, like the snake and the tortoise, becoming part of mainstream Hindu traditions. It was this constant, dynamic exchange of ideas. So why does all this ancient history really matter? Because this quest for knowledge didn't just end thousands of years ago. Its legacy is totally alive, and it continues to shape our world in very real ways today. And you can see this connection between the past and the present everywhere. Think about the ancient Jataka tales, these stories about the Buddha's past lives that taught timeless lessons about kindness. They still resonate. And of course, the ancient disciplines of yoga, which sought to unite the mind, body, and spirit, are now practiced by millions and millions of people all over the globe. The legacy is undeniable. When you step back and look at the whole journey, from those early Vedic hymns to the deep philosophy of the Upanishads, all the way to the new paths of Buddhism and Jainism, what you see is an incredibly diverse and resilient legacy. This isn't just ancient history. It's a living tradition of thought that continues to influence how people today understand themselves and their place in the universe. Which, brings us right back to where we started. The questions that drove those ancient thinkers, well, they're still with us. They're still our questions. This long and varied quest in India shows us that there isn't just one path to wisdom. And it kind of leaves us with a question for our own time. What are the big questions we're still trying to answer? And where will our own quest take us?